This is update for April 16, 2023, day 417 of the war, end of the date update. It's also catch up for April 15. It's obviously weekend, so there is not much going on in the world. However, I'll provide some strategic general updates, and then we're going to walk through the front line as we always do. So as you can see, I'm starting from the world, well, I guess from the part of the world map. Because we're going to talk quite a bit about China. This has been hot topic everywhere, and for good reason, let's put it this way. Let's just start with with the first item, which is China and Russia. I mentioned before that Chinese Minister of Defense is visiting Russia, and to conclude the visit, both Russian President and Chinese Minister of Defense, they met, and they made several statements as a result of that meeting. And just first of all, I want to first highlight that it's somewhat unusual for the president to meet Minister of Defense, because obviously Minister of Defense is lower ranking. So this already highlights the level of relationship between China and Russia. And I'll focus more on the Chinese Minister of Defense, because Russian President State just kind of like very generic sort of statements that's nothing honestly special. However, Chinese Minister of Defense reiterated what was said during the meeting between Russian and Chinese president, that this is once in 100 years change that's coming, and that sort of Russia and China are going to be sort of responsible for the future, and essentially they will be sort of implementing this change that's coming. So this is again highlights that whatever was said by the Chinese ambassador to European Union was just empty rhetoric, basically attempt to lie and attempt to paint the picture in the European Union that whatever was happening between Russia and China is not really happening, but everybody understands that it's happening. Then another statement that Chinese Minister of Defense made is that he said that he picked Russia on purpose for his first trip, and because it highlights special relationship and strategic relationship between both countries. So again, all of this highlights, reiterates what we were seeing during the Russian president and Chinese president meeting, and essentially this reaffirms what already being known, and sort of to remove any sort of doubts for anyone. By the way, a Russian president is probably gonna visit China. It's I think one of the dates is end of or beginning of September, end of August, and then there is another tentative date. But looks like this year, basically, Russian president is coming to China, and potentially even 2 times coming to China. Then a little bit more about China. China issued warning to Philippines. This is the country here next to Taiwan. As I said, this most closest islands about less than 100 kilometers, I think like 80 kilometers away from the Taiwan. And so China basically said that to Philippines leadership that they are sort of seeding the flames of war by putting U.S. military bases on its territory and allowing to build for more military bases. So essentially, China, as you can see, very assertive and basically threatening Philippines. And as I said, if there is a conflict, Philippines is going to be a battlefield. There's no, it's after Taiwan falls, that's where the fighting is probably going to be happening. And well, might be also in the South Korea, because as I said, North Korea is essentially a puppet of China. It's an extension of China, uh, and sort of like similar to how Belarus is extension of Russia. And so as soon as there is war, North Korea is going to attack South Korea. There is no question about that. Then there was a visit of the Brazilian president to China, and there's no surprises there. He was reiterating support for Chinese vision of the peace between Russia and Ukraine, which essentially means that Ukraine is going to be consumed by Russia. And he was actually even more bold. He was directly attacking U.S. For fueling the war in Ukraine, and European Union the same. So essentially, very he clearly puts himself as ally of China. And I would say Argentina is in the same basket. Venezuela, there's no even question about it. There are more countries, probably Ecuador, that are sort of supportive of all of these policies. And I'm not even talking about the countries in Central America. There are countries that literally bought by China. One is being, for example, Nicaragua. I think Honduras is another one. So they actively sort of buying countries there because they don't cost much. I wouldn't be surprised if Mexico will also be supportive of China, given their very bad relationship at the moment between the US and Mexico. Then also German Minister of Foreign Affairs visited China, Taiwan, and I believe Japan and South Korea. And during her visit in China, they had conversation with, my understanding, Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs, and it was very interesting how China tried to convince Germany to support future sort of attack on Taiwan. And so what China said is that that Germany should support unification. That's what's really tricky. What they use, unification of Taiwan and China, similar to how China supported unification of Eastern and Western Germany in 1989. So Chinese are cleverly playing Germany. I don't think it's going to work out, but it was a very clever attempt. Let's put it this way. Then let's talk a little bit about the energy, China and Russia. So China is importing 300 million metric tons of coal per year, and the largest supplier is Indonesia, which is here. Used to be also Australia, but then there is a terrible relationship between the two countries at this point. So Indonesia is the main supplier, but what China is doing is they actually want to hedge their situation, hedge their bets, and increase number of suppliers. So Russia is becoming a large supplier of the coal to China. They exported about, I think, between 15 to 17 million metric tons, which is obviously not much at this moment, but there is agreement to increase in a few years to 50 million metric tons. So what is also why it's important, because in case of the conflict, military conflict, China probably will be isolated from the sea, sort of sea-wise, and it needs to ensure supplies through land, which is Russia is going to be an important supplier, Kazakhstan is going to be another important supplier, which is here, and where China has huge influence, and it's not visible, it's sort of not discussed openly in the West, but China doing everything they can to make Kazakhstan essentially like a vassal state of China, and it's sort of not known to the rest of the world and so on. And similar situation is going on with all of these former Soviet republics in the Central Asia, which also mean Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan. They all trying to. China is trying to essentially have tight control over these countries, because they are some of them, like Kazakhstan, are super rich in resources, in energy resources. So it's first of all it's a crude oil. Then Kazakhstan has a lot of uranium ore, so that's also important, um, including for the West as well, because the main suppliers are Russia, essentially Kazakhstan, and Canada, and Canada cannot pull it by itself. Let's put this way. Um, so bet on just Canada is definitely not going to work out. Then let's actually switch a little bit to Russia, and I just want to give you an example of how sort of all of these Western goods are going into Russia, and I'm talking about the consumer goods. They are more expensive, obviously, because they're not going directly from sort of West. But at the same time, Russia is doing everything, Russian government doing everything it can to alleviate pain for ordinary consumers in Russia, and to kind of like evade all of these sanctions and so on. So the example is Swedish furniture maker IKEA, which is probably famous and known to everyone in the world for the cheap furniture, and it's very popular in Russia. So what happens is basically Russia and Belarus set up a company in Belarus. It's called Swed House, basically probably short for Swedish House. And now it basically imports all of that furniture. I don't know, from, let's say, from IKEA. It doesn't mean from Sweden. It's probably from all of the manufacturing facilities. And then it opened up the store in sort of first store in Moscow, and plans to expand. So as you can see, the sanctions don't quite work. Yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive than when IKEA sells directly, but at the same time, if people really, it's a hot item in Russia, people will pay up a little bit extra, 10-15% for that. Then let's switch to the Russian state finances. They are, as I said many times before, are in terrible shape. And there is another confirmation of that. So Russian government is reducing drastically all infrastructure financing. So basically all kind of roads, anything that's sort of public utilities, whatever, it's all essentially shut down. Their reduction is really drastic by 2.4 times year on year. So it's not just just like we're shaving 10-20%. It's essentially it's getting close to nothing relative to where it used to be. So another confirmation that things are not going well. There is a huge demand for foreign currency. Even everybody, all of the economic news in Russia reporting there is huge demand for Chinese yuan. The reason for Chinese yuan because the euro and US dollar are sort of prohibited or not usable in Russia, so they use Chinese yuan. So the demand switches obviously from euro and USD to Chinese yuan. Then let's switch a little bit to Europe, and in Germany, last three nuclear power plants were shut down, I think, a couple days ago, which will create extremely dangerous situation for Germany, for its energy supply, and I would say this is really you know um, say economic, self-destruction, essentially, because a lot of the production facilities will have to leave Germany. So it's some sort of shape and form of deindustrialization. I think the bad in Germany that somehow high value add manufacturing or services will replace that, and I would say it's not going to happen. That Germany is not that, I would say, doesn't have such a huge advantage over, let's say, China, to be able, and some other countries in many instances, even for example Turkey, to be able to sort of successfully compete and replace the number of the companies and manufacturing facilities that will be gone. That's sort of like sort of lower value add. It just this what's gonna be gone is not gonna be replaced by the high value add, for, as I said, for a couple of reasons. Because the knowledge gap between China and Germany is shrinking pretty fast, and even the gap between Turkey and Germany is shrinking pretty fast. So, like, you may not know, but Turkey is becoming very or used to be strong competitor in terms of um, machine building with Germany. It's obviously not the top notch. It's not your Carl Zeiss, but all of their sort of lower end, and even sort of some of the mid range, is essentially picked up by Turkey, and it's much more competitive. And the similar things are happening in China. So this is the path to essentially economic self-destruction, but apparently Germany or German population is firmly set on that path, and nothing will change it. One more thing. We don't have U.S. here. U.S. is having a strategic exercise. It's called Global Thunder, and what it really means is that 12 B-52s, which is airplanes to carry nuclear bombs, they are flying around, and there are 16 fuel planes that sort of flying with them, refueling them. Essentially, it's like a fleet that's, if there is nuclear war, they will be flying up over US or whatever they will be flying, and they will be shooting these nuclear bombs at the target, obviously probably China or Russia or whatever it's going to be at that moment. But essentially, US is actively sort of on high alert as well. However, there is interesting twist to this is that U.S. Parliament passed the law apparently that prevents U.S. president to unilaterally use nuclear sort of, let's say, weapons. So it needs to be approved first by the U.S. Parliament, which I would say makes sense. The only thing is if the use needs to be really quick, within a few minutes, that's probably going to be not practical. But uh, from some angle, this probably is the right approach as well. Now let's switch to the situation in Ukraine on the front line there. We're gonna do and then a few things about Ukrainian agriculture. So Poland blocked completely passage of Ukrainian agriculture commodities through Poland. So basically, transit, not only sort of import and use of it, but even transit to prevent any sort of illegal activity where goods are declared to be transited, but actually will be offloaded in Poland. Uh, so Hungary did the same thing, and it looks like Bulgaria did the same. So it looks like I think the Romania will follow the suit, and Slovakia will do the same. So essentially, it will completely block off Ukrainian agricultural export to, let's say, Eastern Europe, and the only outlet will be through through Black Sea, which is essentially barely working. Russia, it looks like it's blocking export of Ukrainian grain, or at least tries to do that. And this grain deal, I think, is expiring around May 7, sometime like essentially in 1 month, sometime between May 15 and 17. Don't remember exact date. Um, and it looks like Russia is not getting what they want from this deal, so there is uh, probably very low desire from Russian side to extend it. But again, we'll see what happens with Turkey, because Turkey has tremendous leverage against Russia, and we'll see. It doesn't. It's the probably grain deal probably will get extended unless something um, unusual happens, because Turkey really wants that cheap grain that could be then resold, or sort of say processed and resold in the North Africa and Middle East. Essentially, that's what's really happening there. And that's really main destination of Ukrainian export. In a way, what happened with export to Eastern Europe is sort of was forced decision, because there was no export, there was no outlets through Black Sea, so that sort of was forced, and it's very clear it's destroying livelihood of the farmers in the neighboring countries, and they got upset, and they lobbied their governments, and the governments decided enacted all of this restrictions, which I would say, okay, it's understandable um, why they do that way, and it's all logical. Let's put this way. However, it will create more pressure, more problems in Ukrainian agriculture, which is almost the only remaining sector of the economy that's still somewhat working. Definitely not anywhere close where it used to be. It's sort of less than a half of what it used to be, for sure. Nevertheless, it was still bringing some uh, foreign currency into the country. Now let's switch to the walks through the front line, and I'm going to do it in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border got a little bit escalated. Ukrainian forces attacked uh, power station in Belgorod, which is this neighboring city next, well, essentially next to Kharkiv, and the attack was successful. So um, they destroyed some couple substations. So the majority of the Belgorod is without electricity. So it's sort of retaliation on similar attacks to what Russian side was doing. Uh, Again, I think even though it's sort of, I'd say, probably viewed positively internally, this attack is not gonna, it's not gonna change the outcome of this war. Let's put it this way. It just again propaganda that sort of distracts from the places where the real effort should be applied, and more distraction for internal use to show, okay, we're already hitting Russia, and we making real sort of progress in doing that. Probably it will cause some kind of retaliation from the Russian side. We'll see what that's going to be, but that's the choice that the Ukrainian leadership is making at this point. Now let's jump to the North Lugansk front line. Things here continue to be quiet. As I said before, there's this sort of new trend over past couple weeks, where it's essentially turning into Zaporizhya front line, where it just very static. It's similar to World War One. Essentially, both sides don't have resources to continue active fighting on this front line, and this is just general trend that's been going on probably since the very beginning of the war, where both sides have fewer and fewer resources to continue active warfare. So first it was the Zaporizhia front line that was sort of quiet pretty much since, I would say, early I would say since April of last year. Now this is a new one that joined Zaporizhya Frontline, and so again, this kind of speaks that both sides are exhausted, and this going to some kind of stalemate at this point. Now let's move to North Donbass front line. This is the um, remaining active section of the front line. There are some attacks here in the northern sector of it, but they are more sort of distraction attacks just to keep the pressure on the Ukrainian side. The real attacks are in Bahmut and straight north of it, I'm actually, this is essentially there's no changes. There are some Ukrainian counterattack, and they claim that they managed to recapture the railway station. So essentially, this whole fight is going on back and forth along this railroad line, which is natural good defensive position, and so basically it's just at this point some kind of back and forth between both sides, where the front line changes every day. You know, Ukrainian side was somewhat successful. Doesn't mean that this is the tide has changed. Could be that Russian side is going to be successful tomorrow, but essentially, the whole point is that the front line is also kind of stabilizing. I would want to say yes. Russian side is trying to put pressure, or specifically Wagner mercenaries, but they are they out of their resources. They don't have resources. And speaking of that, now they claim that they're gonna get mobilized soldiers. So before the main source was the prisoners from Russian prisons. Now that was sort of hijacked from them by the Russian military, and now they are getting prisoners, and probably all of the prisoners who wanted to do that already went. So now they're getting sort of mobilized, not sort of, but the Wagner mercenaries. They claim that they are going to be getting just straight mobilized soldiers, and they're already preparing 3 new brigades of these mobilized soldiers. So we may see them sometime later, but at this moment they are out of manpower, and so for that reason it's all stuck. Even though they claim we're moving forward, but they really not really moving forward. And as you can see now, this is really getting very narrow, extremely narrow. Just the town itself, and straight south of it and straight north, it's essentially last hurrah. And we'll see. It's if they're gonna be able to actually truly capture in a clean way entire town. But in any case, even if they do, this is gonna be their, as I said, last hurrah. Ukrainian side obviously also having heavy losses. There's no question. It costs a lot holding on to this western outskirts of Bahmut, and I would say just senseless mid grind from both sides, but it is what it is. That's a war, unfortunately. Otherwise, the rest of the front line is essentially also turning into World War One, stalemate, and nothing really happening there. Now let's move to central Donbass front line, and things here are somewhat similar. Again, all this attack north of Avdiivka without any success, then attacks out of the Pisky salient, then Ukrainian counterattack here, and the whole outcome of all of these huge moves is the status quo. Nothing has changed essentially. And then similar situation in Marinka, where Russian side continues futile attacks that maybe they move forward, I don't know, 50 meters in a month or something like that, or 100 meters in a month. It's essentially World War One on steroids, and that's really what's going on there. This is the picture around Avdiivka, where Russian side had initial success starting from March 11, 19, and then this is they essentially stuck, and there is no progress since then. Then the situation on the Zaporizhya front line is, as I said, it's World War One. There is no movements, nothing there. Just exchange of artillery fire, obviously probing, reconnaissance attacks, but otherwise it's all quiet for now. Now, by the way, so now Ukrainian leadership flipped, and they say that the offensive is going to happen soon, which could be within a couple weeks or within a month. So we'll see what happens. The situation on the battlefield is extremely difficult terrain due to the heavy rains. Literally everything is just a sea of mud. So all of the wheeled vehicles are essentially getting stuck. And the only way to get by is by tracked vehicles. And even those can get stuck. So, as I said, a lot of that equipment that comes to Ukraine that's wheeled is somewhat unusable during this spring, some of the springtime and some of the fall time. So again, the Russian side is in a little bit better situation because they use more sort of Soviet-developed vehicles, which mostly tracked. There are some obviously wheeled ones, but artillery for the most part, meaning self-propelled artillery, is tracked. They don't have any wheeled ones because, for example, Ukraine has the Caesars. Ukraine getting more wheeled ones as well, like Susannas. All of that stuff is really not suitable for the terrain conditions in Ukraine and let's say in the former Soviet Union, or let's say Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, all of these countries. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.